Namaste, Ram here, your DNA hacker. Hope you're having a beautiful day wherever you may be. I'm going to give you a nice lecture today so that you can learn what omega fats are. If you don't already know, you've probably heard that they're good for you, and you want to know how to get more of them and actually how to optimize the ratios of omegas, because there are different types of omegas, and in the Western diet, a lot of people end up eating the wrong ones. And therefore their ratios are off, and those ratios lead to disease, as we'll describe. Of course, make sure that you subscribe if you haven't done so already. Get notifications, give the thumbs up, comment so we can tailor make it for you. This helps us produce better content. If you have a question, please comment below, and I always make sure that I answer them, whether it's in the comment or on an additional video. Okay, so you've probably heard what omega fats are, and at the end of this video I will erase this and I will give you a picture of why saturated versus unsaturated, why is there a difference, and those polyunsaturated fats, those omega fats, why are they good for you. And of course, before the end, I'm going to talk about what are the sources, where can you get these, and how can you balance your ratio. And in the link below, I also have an article on medium.com that goes into more detail. You want to make sure you check that out. It's an excellent article. If you have not checked out my medium.com account, you want to follow it. I have nearing 40 articles. They're usually about in the 3 to 7 minute range read. They're not super long, but they're very good articles with a lot of useful information so that you can learn how to live a 100% stress and disease-free life. As I've mentioned before, this is a mission that I'm on, is to teach people that they can actually 100% be free of things that right now are obstacles. One of the ways to do that obviously is with diet, which is what I'm going to be focusing on today. But there's a number of things that I teach in my DNA Hacker Secret programs and retreats. If you want more information on that, go to some of the links below. You can also book a free coaching session where I'll be there to serve you if you're interested. Okay, so 2 things we're going to talk about today. We're going to learn how to balance omega-3 versus omega-6. This is the one that you want more of. This is the one that you don't want as much of. In reality, you want a balance of both, because in the article on medium.com, I describe a Native American population in Alaska, the Inuits, that have a very high omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, so they have a lot more omega-3 than normal, and that actually also has some health consequences. So in life, it's all about balance. To master the art of living a stress and disease-free life, it's about balance. Stress, the neurochemicals involved in stress, too little, too much, not good. You want it in balance. Really, what really is the basis of health is balance, homeostasis. You don't want to push yourself to either extreme. And in the case of omegas, that is the case. The problem with Western diet is that the Western diet ratio, particularly in the US, is very heavily favored towards omega-6s. And this leads to a lot of health consequences. So the ideal ratio would be an exact 1-to-1 ratio. So it's not that you can't eat things that have omega-6. For example, in the article, I include a table that illustrates different nuts. And one of those nuts, walnuts, which I wrote an article on medium.com, one of those nuts that's often ignored but is very beneficial for your health, has a good percentage of omega-6. But it also has more than more than most nuts. It has omega-3s. Even though it has more omega-6 than omega-3, it does have a significant amount of omega-3, so it's a nut that you want to consume. So the ideal ratio would be 1 or 1-to-2, leaning towards omega-3s. So I have this kind of, actually I have it here. You see it here, omega-6 to omega-3. So you want more of the equal amounts, or maybe slightly towards the omega-3, because the omega-3s are associated with a number of health benefits. The modern Western diet, on the other hand, is a huge towards the other extreme. So instead of having about equal amounts of omega-6 to omega-3, it actually has a lot more omega-6. And it can be 15 to 1 or higher. In some people, that ratio, because of their diet, could be as high as 50 to 1. And of course, these are individuals that are going to be prone to a number of those chronic ailments that are caused mainly by diet, such as cancer, inflammation, such as, inflammation could be arthritis, could be cardiovascular disease. So the ideal ratio is these omega fats are important. They're found, for example, in the cell membrane of cells. Your brain is very enriched in fat, and the fat that it wants is the omega-3s. And I'll be talking about specific omega-3s in a short one. So it's important for brain development, heart health, mental health. So there's a whole literature showing how if you get the right balance of ratios, it leads to decreased depression, for example. So it's very good for mental health. So oftentimes it's not that this would be the cause of mental illness, but it's one of the things that exacerbates mental illness, and that would make a psychiatrist's job much more difficult if he chooses to approach the mental illness pharmaceutically if the brain isn't being fed correctly. So there's an area that's of nutritional psychiatry or functional medicine where people are very interested in how you can optimize the body. This is very important, and you should look to optimize and balance yourself before you pursue any type of other treatment. In the case of mental illness, as I'll be writing in the future, this is an area that needs a lot of help. It is an area that is very reduced in its focus because it's approaching mental health from a very physiological standpoint when we are a multidimensional being, and drugs don't really treat the cause. They only work at the effect level. The cause of the mental illness is not necessarily at the brain level. But that's not the topic of today. But if you're interested in that topic, you want to know more, let me know, comment below, and I'll do a video. And if you have specific questions, you can private message me on social media at Rama's Rooted Tree. Of course, to optimize your omega-3s to omega-6s, you want to, actually, let me just turn it a little bit this way. You want to avoid processed vegetable oils. This is a huge problem. As I'm getting up close here and personal. You want to avoid vegetable oils, processed vegetable oils, in particular soybean. Soybean oil is one of those, or corn oil. Canola, it's neither bad nor is it good. It's not an ideal oil to use. The best oil, but not really for cooking, is flax oil. Flax seeds, flax oil is going to be very rich in omega-3s, low in omega-6. If you go to my article on medium.com, you'll see I have a table where I show the percentages. Omega fats are flaxseed is excellent, and flax oil. Typically, when I do recommend oils, it would be safflower or olive oil, but I do not recommend that you routinely use oil for cooking. Because remember that you want to eat foods in their more natural state intact. If you heat it, you oxidize it, you generate damaging chemicals. So olive oil is great. It's not going to be very rich in omega-3s, but it's not rich in omega-6s. So olive oil has been shown to be heart healthy. It's a good oil, but you want to consume it in its more natural state. So today, for example, I made some lentils, and the recipe called for heating the olive oil with the spices, but I let the spices sit in the oil, and then I just poured it into the lentils after the lentils were cooked. You want to eat foods in their more whole, natural, raw state, if at all possible, at least 50%. The more you take foods and you alter them, and you change them chemically by heating them, for example, then you're generating things that may not be suitable for your body. And this is a huge problem in the health field, disease field, is that we're eating foods that are not good for our body. For example, we take foods like meat, for example, which has been shown to be detrimental for health, and then we have to add stuff to it to make it edible, to trick the senses, in a sense, to accept the food, to make it acceptable for my nose, for smell, for taste, maybe even for my visual stimuli. And so this is masking or hiding what's behind the food, which is elements that are actually detrimental for your health. And of course, foods high in omega are of animal origin: the beef, the chicken, the pork, the eggs. You could reduce this and increase the omega-3s in like grass-fed or free-range eggs. But at Rama's Rooted Tree and in my DNA Hackers programs, I only recommend, if you want to consume eggs, that you consume them humane certified, meaning that these are handled chickens that are in an open environment. Cage-free does not mean anything different than non-cage. These animals are in a bigger environment, but they have a whole bunch of them, and it's very inhumane, and it leads to very difficult conditions for growing, and it reduces the quality of the egg. And of course, those animals are not fed anything other than grain. So you want to avoid grain-fed animals or factory-raised animals. As Buster is going crazy. Hey, Buster, get over here. Come here. What are you doing? This is Buster. All right. So we also want to increase our intake of a number of seeds. So again, at Rama's Rooted Tree, we encourage a whole plant-based diet. You want to increase. Majority of your diet should be whole plant-based. And in the case example of this topic that we're talking about today, you want flax, chia seeds, hemp seeds, pumpkin, walnut, almonds. So getting some nut bars, adding seeds to your any type of seeds to your smoothies, for example, or to your cereals, or to your salads is important, or just eating the nuts straight, hazelnuts, pecans, etc. Fish obviously would be recommended for this. The problem with fish, and the reason why I don't recommend it, is two reasons. The environment has become increasingly toxic, and so has the food in the marine ecosystem. Not only from microplastic that is littered throughout the ocean and is found within the tissues of fish themselves, but in addition, the chemicals that adhere to the plastic that it then works its way to the tissues of the fish, mercury toxicity, other chemicals. And in addition, we've also damaged the marine ecosystem to the point of collapse by mid-century. And I cannot, in good conscience, there is no way that I can ethically recommend consuming something that will continue to destroy the marine ecosystem. So if you want to help the planet and you want to watch my video on eco-wellness, you want to see how eco-wellness, your consciousness about the ecosystem, how it relates to your well-being. You want to be eco-conscious. If you want to be 100% stress and disease-free, you must integrate them. All right, so if you do eat fish, you want to limit it to 6 ounces or less. All right, so now we get to the other side, and there are these different sources of, you don't really need to know what these words stand for, but the short is ALA, EPA, and DHA. These are different omega-3 fatty acids. This one is converted into these two. A lot of the foods you're going to eat, especially of vegan sources, are going to have this version, which your body, if you are vegetarian or vegan, you're non-fish eater. Evidence has shown that despite the fact that we don't convert ALA over to EPA and DHA effectively. Women do so more so than men. However, it has been found that non-fish eaters still have these blood levels of EPA, DHA similar to fish eaters. So you don't need to eat fish to actually have healthy amounts of these two key omega-3s. So now we've shifted away from omega-6. We're focusing on what about the omega-3s do we want? And in the article, I go into a lot more detail as to what each of these individually they do. But in a general fashion, just to conclude, what are some of the health benefits? Well, we've mentioned them already, some of them. Brain health. It's food for your brain. Mental health, consequently. Your brain function is optimized and therefore your mental health as well. It's anti-inflammatory. So for example, decrease arthritis, decrease neurodegeneration. So it's been found, for example, I mentioned in the article that Alzheimer's patients have low DHA levels. So it's not that omega-3s are going to reverse Alzheimer's, but they may actually prevent it if you start optimizing your omega fat levels before Alzheimer's actually is manifest. Obviously, improve cardiovascular health. It's been shown that it enhances learning and memory. Again, brain effect, attention. It's been shown that for treatment, supplementing in attention deficit disorder, children that get supplementation of omega fatty acids actually have improved attention. And of course, also lastly, lowered blood pressure. Again, for heart health, for cardiovascular health. So you want to check out the article on medium.com. It goes into a little more detail. If you really want to learn how to optimize it, I suggest you join my programs. This is a one-stop shop for holistic health. It's like unlike anything out there. Nobody has a program like this. And my live events are amazing. I have one coming up on June 17th to the 20th. So about a month from now, a little less than a month from now. Link is below if you want more information. And I hope that served you well. So make sure that at least 50% of your diet is whole plant-based, leaning towards fresh fruits and vegetables. So if you're eating 50% of your diet is fresh, whole, plant-based foods, especially raw, you're eating them as nature is intended to have you to eat them. It's how it's being offered to you. Then you're doing yourself a service. When you start eating foods more refined, more processed, I think I mentioned that somewhere on here, packaged or processed foods also are going to be high in omega-6s, along with other chemicals and things that are not some things that you want in your body. So you want things in their intact whole state. If you can, that's better for you. All right? I hope you have a beautiful day wherever you may be. And if it's the evening, have a pleasant night. So I wanted to interject before the ending. I know I mentioned at the beginning that I was going to explain saturated versus unsaturated and what does these omega fats are basically polyunsaturated. What does that mean, saturated? So just think about a sponge. What does it mean that a sponge is saturated with water? It means that the sponge is completely filled or holding the maximum amount of water molecules that it could hold. In terms of a fat, remember what are fats? So fat is glycerol, which is just a chemical structure. You don't really know what glycerol is, but it's glycerol with fatty acid chains connected to it. 3 fatty acid chains. If they are linear like this, it would be saturated. If they have a bend or a kink, like a little slight bend like this, they would be unsaturated. So this fatty acid chain here would be saturated. These two would be unsaturated. This one is a full saturated fat because all the chains are straight and all the carbons that form this chain have the maximum amount of hydrogens that they can hold. You can see that, actually this is, let me fix this. You can see here that in this example here, this one has 2 hydrogens just like this carbon here. This one has 2, 2, 2, 2. 2 is the maximum number of hydrogens that the fatty acids can hold. But these 2 carbons, because they have a double bond, unsaturated, they are not holding the maximum number of hydrogens they can hold. Therefore, this chain is not saturated with hydrogens. It's unsaturated because it's holding 2 less hydrogens than it could normally hold. So a fat that has double bonds is considered unsaturated. A fat that does not have double bonds and therefore all the carbons are holding the maximum number of hydrogens would be considered saturated. One trick that we used to use was partially hydrogenated oils, which are still used in some processed products, and was the basis of like margarine. These were oils that were hydrogenated, partially hydrogenated, to make this is plant origin, plant-based, liquid at room temperature like an oil. These are saturated, animal-based, solid at room temperature. They tend to aggregate and bunch together and form masses like fatty tissue masses. These don't. What they used to do with those oils was they partially hydrogenated to shift them more like this, to make them more saturated like and solid in consistency, and therefore you could create a spread that you could put over toast. But those actually have very damaging effects, and they've been slowly being eliminated from our diet. Because these fats have straight fatty acid chains, they can come together and bunch up, whereas the ones with the kinks spread out. Just imagine if somebody's standing here and I'm like this, they can stand right by me, but if I extend my arm like this, they can't occupy the space, they'll be pushed out. So it will separate the amount, the fats, and it will allow these or prevent these from aggregating together. This is why a high saturated fat diet will cause these fats to bunch up together to form fatty tissues in your arteries that will eventually clog the artery, preventing flow through the artery. And if it's your coronary artery, then obviously it can lead to like a heart attack. So these omega fats are this kind, are unsaturated, and they are polyunsaturated, meaning the fat itself is going to have more than one double bond. And like I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that even though it may be called an omega fat, we mentioned that there's omega fats that are not good for you, some that are. You want to get, it's not that the omega-6 is bad for you, is that in too large quantities is bad for you. Omega-3s in large quantities are bad for you as well. They can actually increase your susceptibility to strokes. So you want to balance it. When you want optimization, you don't want, oh, I'm going to do away with omega-6 and just have omega-3s. So it's all about balance. So again, I just wanted to give you a little bit of feedback before the end on how this works, what is saturated versus unsaturated fats. There are some saturated fats that are associated with health, medium chain triglycerides found highly enriched in coconut oil. I do recommend those as part of your diet. You can also take them as a supplement, but coconut oil, organic expeller, pressed coconut oil is just fine. That would be around 50 to 60% MCTs or medium chain triglycerides. But again, it's about balance. Too much saturated fat, too much of the animal origin fat is not good for you. That's why in the video I mentioned in the article, I mentioned if you are going to eat meat, which I do not recommend at all for living a 100% stress and disease-free life, but it's something that you want to continue to take. You want to make sure that it's on the leaner side. And if you've seen my other videos on my work, especially on eco-wellness, you'll understand why ethically I cannot recommend neither fish nor beef or chicken or pork or eggs because of what is being done to the environment and to the marine ecosystem that we have completely destroyed and is on the brink of collapse. All right, well, I hope that served you well. My name is Ram. Have a beautiful day. Take care.